The first anti-aircraft rocket launchers originated during the final stages of World War II. In all sectors of the eastern and western fronts, Germany realized a chronic lack of air defense. Allied aviation controlled the air at all hours and used cluster ammunition, rockets, bombs. This was to hit supply convoys or the main enemy force. The Wehrmacht could not organize defense effectively. Road marches in broad daylight or at night were constantly harassed by enemy airstrikes. Countless amounts of men and equipment were destroyed, and the personnel's morale was at a low point due to their inability to catch a break from Allied raids. We must also remember that these losses not only had a monetary value when we consider the drain on resources. Recouping these military assets in Germany on the verge of economic collapse proved difficult. The shortage of anti-aircraft guns of 20 millimeters or more was already chronic. The command was very upset, to say the least, because they were not provided with what they needed to defend themselves from the hordes of Sturmovik planes. As a desperate solution, they formed teams of literally dozens of men armed with MG machine guns to make concentrated fire. However, they were not powerful enough to drop, for example, an Il-2, which needed at least 37 mm cannons to take it down from the sky. The Wehrmacht needed an anti-aircraft weapon with maneuverability and a high rate of fire. Furthermore, the necessity of fighting against enemy aviation that could fly over them at any angle and direction at speeds of 100 and 300 meters per second was another priority. The focus was to design this new weapon to always accompany infantry troops, something like the FliegerFaust, which was cheap and lethal and demonstrated its usefulness during 1944 spring clashes. Within the field of unguided rockets, Wehrmacht developed a general concept of what it urgently needed. The tactical and technical requirements called for the creation of a portable anti-aircraft rocket system, or MANPAD, that consisted of a small caliber guided projectile and a multi-barrel launcher that could be serviced by only one operator. The requirements stipulated that the launcher design should be simplified to the maximum, following the example of the first Panzerfaust. It was also requested that the rocket dispersion wouldn't exceed 10%. This is because all these rockets fired at the same time needed to be in the same direction. The German MANPADs would fire salvos against aircraft that flew very low at incredible speeds. To have a chance of success, it was expected that only 2 seconds were available to fire with all the arsenal available. The systems had to create a dense layer of protection at low altitudes that would hinder enemy air raids. It was planned that these MANPADs would be as widespread as the Panzerfaust and the Panzerschreck. On June 44, the Armament Department instructed Hassag to create a small unguided rocket based on an old design. The prototype was named Air Fist. The weapon was a 4-barrel 20mm caliber rocket launcher with round-shaped launch tubes located vertically on top of each other. The unguided 20mm rocket was essentially identical to the RPG grenades, 4,322, which consisted of a warhead with a fuse, a jet engine, a powder charge and an ejection charge. When the rocket was launched, an ejection charge ignited that propelled it up to 100 meters per second. This was considered a safe distance once the rocket's main engine was ignited. The first design seemed to have many weak points because its precision was lackluster. Furthermore, intercepting a moving target that moved between 100 and 200 meters per second was utopian for all shooters. It was almost impossible to hit an aircraft because rocket technology was not well suited to those speeds. Besides, the inside fuse didn't burn fast enough to blow up when it was close to the target. The dynamic impulses of the propellant charge and the main rocket engine superimposed on each other greatly. This disturbed the flight stability of the projectile, which was 25 centimeters long. After continuous innovation efforts, the final result did not justify resources on its production. In the end, the Germans were left with erratic rocket launchers without practical use. However, the High Command didn't give up on this idea due to necessity. At the beginning of October 44, an improved version of this system with a relatively cheap and easy design, called the FliegerFaust B, was introduced. It promised rapid development in much less time than its predecessor, the Alpha, which was vital in such a desperate situation. It consists of 2 fire control levers, a trigger, a folding armrest, an electric ignition mechanism, and an observation rod. The magazine was extended to 9 rockets, which fired in 2 bursts. 5 rockets were fired in the first shot, and a second later, the remaining 4 came out. The fire ignited thanks to an induction generator like an RPG. A new propellant powder was introduced. The flight trajectory improved ostensibly. There was also a trace element. This warhead was fragmented and high explosive, very similar to that of a regular 20 mm anti-aircraft gun. To stabilize the flight of this small rocket, on this occasion, it was decided to do so by rotating it on its axis. This was done at a rotation speed that reached 26,000 revolutions per minute. The Wehrmacht deliberately aimed to produce 4 million FliegerFaust, even though combat operational qualities were still too far away. In addition to the critical situation at the front, the contract signing was greatly facilitated by the fact that this weapon could be manufactured by a minor German industry. In companies with low-skilled workforce and where not too many standards were required for production, many small workshops worked very well on all kinds of stamped and welded structures, such as those that manufactured the MG-42. Several workshops suffered various attacks by Allied aviation, and that delayed the production of the FliegerFaust. This played a key role by not getting the delivery of this revolutionary weapon on the designated dates. By April 45, only 102 rocket launcher systems had been assembled, of which 83 reached the front. At the time the Russians were inside Germany, a newly formed anti-aircraft artillery unit was assembled, and within that formation were a good handful of men armed with rocket launchers. Unfortunately, reports have not survived to this day, or at least none have been found, telling us whether it was used in combat. At the end of the war, and thanks to this enormous development effort, another type of infantry was born. This infantry was responsible for managing portable anti-aircraft missile systems. This weapon is one of the most notable what-ifs of the Second World War. It cannot be determined if it was a complete failure, but it can also be considered a success. The goal of equipping the German soldier with one of these was nothing more than a hope for the German High Command. It is in the end one more addition to the miraculous weapons of the Third Reich, unable to turn around a conflict whose fate was already decided.